How tough was the 55 race?
The 55 race was one of the celebrated events of my life, and it was one of the really exciting campaigns. It was a special election, so there was nobody else running at the time. It was in the middle of a newspaper strike, which meant that we had some kind of peculiar problems in terms of publicizing it. I had 23 people ran against us, including a former mayor.
Wow. Was the district totally in Detroit?
Yeah, it was totally. Detroit was in the ward system then.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, the old district was wards 10, 12, 14, and 16. And you don't hear the wards anymore. I don't think they even use them anymore in the city of Detroit. And Soapy Williams, the governor, called the election. And, as I said, 23 people ran. Ernie Lacy, the former chairman of the district national committeeman, he ran. And my friends in labor came through in a wonderful way. And Dad's friends came through. And we won. The principal opponent in the primary was a wonderful black minister by the name of Reverend Charles A. Hill. Had a voice like thunder. Was the pastor of Hartford Avenue Baptist Church, which was located over on West Grand Boulevard. And we had two rather brutal races, he and I, and then we became the best of friends.
So he challenged you another time, you mean, in another primary?
Well, he ran a second time.
Second time.
Scared the bejabbers out of me, but we beat him.
Right. So the second time, there were just the two of you in the primary?
No, there were others.
Yeah.
Primaries involving a young member of Congress. Mm-hmm. The young member generally looks particularly vulnerable, and so he attracts lots of opposition. One of the interesting things about the first race was I had a fellow in there that had run against Dad. And he was an interesting guy. His campaign platform was the same that he had in 1932, and that was that the dollar should be dated so it could be depreciated 1% a month, so people would have to spend their dollars. It didn't work very well in 32, and it didn't work very well in 55.
Probably wouldn't today either. So you've had 5 reapportionments, the district change, 5 or 6,
probably
right?
more than that, Lynn, because not all reapportionments take. You remember from your career in the legislature that the courts act and the courts throw out the legislative reapportionments, and sometimes the courts act alone. Sometimes the legislature will act. First reapportionment, which we had in 1964, I think we went through 3 or 4 iterations of it. And at other times we've had several, and sometimes the courts have done it alone, sometimes the legislature's done it, sometimes the courts reviewed and thrown it out, sent it back to the legislature, sometimes the courts then proceeded to do the redistricting.
In 2 instances that I know of, your race with John Lozinski and with Rivers, Congressman Rivers, you were merged with other incumbents. Were those the toughest races? Or?
They were tough races. The first race was a tough race. The race against John Lashinsky, who was a friend of mine, son of a man who ran with my dad, and as an incumbent, was a very brutal race. The issue there was the Civil Rights Bill of 57-64, for which I had voted and for which he had voted against, at least 64 when he had voted against. And feelings were running very, very high on that particular issue. The Wall Street Journal gave me a 1 in 15 chance of winning that race, but turned out we did a little better than they figured. I figured out that we'd get about 55% of the vote, and it turned out we got 56. But the rest of the race went pretty well as planned. John had a speech impediment, and one of my campaign issues was that the district needed somebody who could make an intelligent, comprehensible understandable speech on the floor of the House. We had to go around the district and explain to folks, why is it that you would support somebody who would vote against a black man being able to vote when a white man is able to vote? That's one of the important attributes of citizenship, but if everybody can't do it, we don't really have a democracy. And the people were very good and very fair, and the result was that we won. And one of the interesting results is that in the 16th, which is a wonderful district, we had wonderful people, we would have get-togethers, and the get-togethers would involve folks from both sides. And if you hadn't been in the election, you wouldn't know who was on which side, because they were all friends, and we'd all tell stories and just have a great time, talk about it, laughing about it. And all of the people who were involved on both sides were great friends of mine. It was a wonderful race. With Lynn, we had another one. One of the interesting things about it is that the election of 64 was a time when there was a landslide against the Republicans, as you'll remember. Goldwater scared the bejeebers out of everybody by threatening to use the atom bomb. And it cost him dear. But the Republicans put 6 incumbent congressmen in 3 districts. They had 2 Republicans in the north, Bennett and Knox, that they put in the same district. And then they put Nedzi and Harold Ryan in one district on the east side, and they put Lashinsky and I in the same district over here. Some of that was to create districts so that people in the legislature could run. That happened again, as you will note, in 2002. But the upshot of the whole business was that George Romney was trying to create a change in the delegation. There were 12 Republicans and 7 Democrats, 19 members. And he wound up with exactly the same numbers. But the numbers had changed in one important particular. There were, after the election, 12 Democrats and 7 Republicans. They wound up losing 5 seats with his manipulations. 65 was a remarkable year. We got Medicare through. Johnson came in, had a wonderful record of legislative accomplishment, federal aid to education, Medicare, Medicaid, array of conservation bills. I made Johnson fund the Clean Water Act in full, made him spend $16 billion, which he was at first very angry about, but which, quite frankly, saved the Great Lakes, cleaned up the water of the nation, and was one of the great conservation accomplishments of our history. The race against Lynn was somewhat similar. In both instances, they didn't give me a very good chance of winning, but we forged a good plan and went out and ran a good race. And we
what
won
were the
handily in both
characteristics? You
instances.
said civil rights was a major issue in the Lashinsky race.
64.
What about in the case of Lynn? Were there key
Well,
issues?
the big question was I liberal enough? What the legislature did was they took a blue-collar labor industrial district.
Now her base.
No, my district. Her
Right.
base was Ann Arbor,
Okay.
and they mixed the two. They took some of my district away from me and some of her district away from her. They left her strength, and they took a lot of my strength away. The upshot of the whole business was that we forged a good plan. We decided we were not going to do much running in Ann Arbor, which was her strength, but we'd work just hard enough there that she'd have to stay home and work. When the ballots were counted, we got 60% of the vote in our